Hey folks, with us today, Pat, founder of Abstract.us. Pat, super happy to have you on.
Hey, yeah, likewise, Nicolas.
Awesome. Let's start with the most important thing. What is Abstract.us and who is it for?
Yeah, so Abstract is essentially abstract. No, just kidding. We actually started as a research project out of Loyola Marymount University 4 years ago. And the idea was to use natural language processing, which is a subset of AI, to abstract or make sense of government policy and legislation. So we made Abstract to make sense of how changes in government impact you as an individual, a business, a nonprofit, or whomever it may be.
How did you initially get to the insight that there's like a real business case behind that? Because I mean, you raised venture, so the goal for venture is like always to hit like the 50 or 100 million a year mark. So what was like the first like thing you saw that where you basically came to the realization that this can be a big business?
Yeah, so I always like telling the story because, like I said, we started as a research project, and then shortly after, we as engineering students, decided to, explore beyond the engineering part of campus and talk to the folks over at the Entrepreneurship Center. And one of the professors said, "Hey, I think this has legs. I think this can be an actual business." And so naturally, as any college student would do, we said, "Let's make a social media app. Let's make a social media app where we can break down these government bills and policies and make sense of that for individuals." That was really tough to do because most people don't really have the sort of attention span to actually read government bills and regulations. And even with abstracts, it was pretty hard to pull off. So through all of that, we started talking to chambers of commerce, actually, and these chambers of commerce represent businesses in their respective areas. So we started with the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, and we learned that they had to keep track of what's going on in government to understand how changes in policy, government policy, would impact their businesses. And then from there, we started learning about the lobbyists that they hired and how the lobbyists have to keep track of government legislation. And from there, we learned about the corporate side, which it turns out 99% of companies, after a certain point, usually after 100 employees, have to keep track of how changing government policy impacts their business. And so that's sort of the progression of how we got to our focus now, which is selling to the corporate legal, the corporate lobbyist teams, and the lobbyists themselves. So it's been an interesting, fun, painful last 4 years, but that's a high level.
If you need to hire the right developers and ship fast, then React Squad is for you. A boutique agency that specializes in React and only works with fast growth startups. Visit reactsquad.io to learn more.
Interesting. So what's your split right now between the lobbyist and the really corporate clients?
Yeah, great question. So ever since we started, actually focusing on sort of the B2B side of things, we started with lobbyists, and specifically in California. The reason being that California is a very complex legislative environment. There's a lot of laws being changed, lots of regulations. California actually sets a lot of the standards for the rest of the United States when it comes to emissions, privacy, you name it. And so we said, okay, if we can crack the nut here in California, this can work in any other state and on the federal level. So we focused on these lobbyists in California, and the idea was, from there we can then sell to their corporate clients, because most lobbyists represent some type of corporate entity or a nonprofit. And we realized that, especially in California, there were a lot of these bill tracking tools, but nothing that was sort of modern and intuitive to use at the state level. So again, we took what we had built for a research project and we fine-tuned it into a workflow tool for these lobbyists to use. So if you're a lobbyist, you can imagine it as I'm a lobbyist. I use Abstract to discover anything that's relevant for my corporate client, in terms of changes in government policy. And then I can use Abstract to take notes, create reports, and send that to my client. I'll pause there because what we're shifting to now is a little bit more evolved from there. But that, I don't know if you had any other questions about that sort of initial focus.
No, I think it makes a ton of sense. Even though I have no clue about the industry overall, I think it all made a ton of sense. And then, can you already share the tweak and the shift you're doing now, or still behind the scenes?
I would say the high level is that, a state like California has over 5,000 bills a year. If you keep track of all the changes, it's over 25,000 changes a year. Sort of the way to keep track of all this was always with keywords. So if I care about taxes or I care about climate, I would have to use like a tracking system to let me know, hey, anytime a change in a bill has the word taxes, let me know, right? Let's just say all that's going to change with these modern AI models, these large language models that can understand the context of a bill beyond just keyword. So where we're shifting now is, okay, instead of us giving you a stack of updates like this, here are all the regulations that have to do with taxes. Let's learn about your business. Let's teach a model about it. And then let's actually break down what that means for your business. And if you think about it, I'm careful with using the word replace, but it's really supplementing the work that a human does, an analyst does. And that's where we're heading next.
I love that, especially that it's like really use case driven. I mean, you're doing it for 4 years and didn't just like slap AI onto like a random idea that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I laugh because, we knew about these models back in 2019 and people knew about it for much longer, but it was interesting seeing the vaporware over last year.
For sure. Let's switch gears completely from like more like what you do and who you do it for to like how you built the company. So, I mean, I saw on your LinkedIn that you raised 2.5 million in funding recently. Tell us a bit about, first off, like your funding history from like being having a research project till today. And then also like how big is the team and any milestones you're able to share?
Yeah. So our story was interesting because I guess we're one of the more rare cases of a team that raised funding out of college with no work experience other than the internships we had. And we also didn't have industry experience in policy, politics, etc. So yeah, I guess the high level is, along with sort of lessons I've learned, you really can't get anywhere by yourself. Like a lot of this all depends on the relationships you build with people who are trusted in these circles. And by the way, this applies to sales and many other things in life. But really, we got our foot in the door because we were able to sell the vision to the director of entrepreneurship who knew a lawyer, startup lawyer in LA. And he knew a bunch of venture capital funds and partners. And so getting him bought in our vision and then using him as an advocate when we went to go out to pitch really helped a lot. But at the end of the day, we had to put in the grit, right? So I pitched to over 100 funds. After we graduated, we got rejected by all of them. One of them said, if, oh, you didn't go to an Ivy League school, or, you don't have work experience. So, I don't know why we should invest in you. They later asked to invest in our company. I told them no. Anyways, I love sharing that story. But essentially, we went through the process of pitching, learned a bunch of why, people were passing on us, tweaked the pitch, went down, actually continued to build product, build, traction, and then went out to pitch to those same people. And of those same, 100 investors, 2 of them said yes. And then we went from there. But I would say most people get caught up. I say just keep pushing And always remember that in the pre-seed stage, the three things that matter are: can you build a product yourself? Can you actually sell it? Whether it's, I don't know what's going on. This is like a Mac.
No worries.
Can you sell it, right? Which is either revenue, which is the best, or just some sort of usage. And can you hire? Meaning, can you bring people together to work with you? Can you prove that you can convince people to be crazy enough to join you to build this product? So those three things, can you build, can you sell, and can you hire, are usually what these pre-seed investors are looking for.
And I guess right now it's more of like an enterprise sales motion for you. So how do you look at GTM in this industry?
Oh yeah. So look, enterprise is interesting because depending on who you ask, people say enterprise for a wide range of annual contract values. I define it anywhere between 60 to 100K and up. Usually $100,000 sort of annual contract value and higher. And usually, the sales cycle takes minimum 2 to 3 months or more, right? Because of such large contracts. So I would say my advice for investing is the same advice I have for enterprise, which is, well, first you need to have some sort of clear product market fit, right? A need that, a burning need that they have that you are actually addressing with your product. And then beyond that, if you don't know those enterprise contacts directly, for those initial contracts, create pilots, right? Say, hey, we'll charge you down the line, but put it in contract. First 6 months are half off or free, right? As we develop this initial product with you, and then we'll ramp up, right? And so that way, both parties are aligned with what's needed. And then, I've this has been successful as well. But if there's somebody in that enterprise that can help develop your early product, it doesn't hurt to give them a product advisory role, maybe with a little bit of equity, so that they're truly bought in what you're doing. Now, some places it might be a conflict of interest, but usually it's not. And I would say that's like my last piece of advice for getting these initial enterprise contracts.
I love that nugget, especially the product advisory, because I think that's something which is very underutilized.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, people are really selfish is what I realized, right? They just care about most of themselves, which is natural, right? It's like
human beings.
Yeah. Human beings. It's like evolutionary, right? Like they're just trying to stay alive, right? And usually what that means is, oftentimes they have their own needs or they have a family, right? And in order to meet those needs, you need money, right? You need some sort of financial stability. And so what are ways that you can, get people to get to your milestone, to help you get to your milestones, but then also realize that they need to get something out of it too, right? And how are you equitable about that? So yeah, a little bit's like quid pro quo, but also just being aligned with what's in it for the other side.
And then moving on to the team side, I think, are you like a rough 15 to 20 is like what I stalked on your LinkedIn? Is that like roughly what, right? Or like how big is the team right now? Like what's the split up right now?
We're 10 full-time employees, and we have a couple of people part-time, so that's why it's a little bit more inflated.
Got it.
Yeah, team of 10, man.
Yeah, and then of those 10, like is it like half engineers, a couple CS and sales, or like what's the split like?
Yeah, so I mean, it took us a while to really hone in on the structure we have, but I really think we have a really solid setup now. So most of the team consists of engineers. So we split engineering into two sort of tranches because of our work. It's heavily focused on data. So our data team is 3 engineers. Our product engineering team is 2. And then so we have 5 engineers, and then we have our head of product, who also leads out customer experience and support, and then the 2 people who do support and success with him, and then my growth team, which I'm very I have very strong opinions about this now, but I really think at the early stages for B2B SaaS, growth team should be one and the same, and it should consist of sales and marketing. marketing and sales should not be separate things. They shouldn't be under product or anything like that. In my opinion, marketing and sales should be together under the same team. And I like to call it growth because they are responsible for growing new sales, new leads into the funnel, closing those deals, and then they hand it off to customer success.
Let's dive into that. Why do you think that? Like, how did you come to that structure from the typical marketing brings in the MQLs, they got pushed over to sales, they turn the MQLs to SQLs, and so on?
Because, again, this is very much dependent on your industry, but in particular for us, we're working with larger contracts now. But this also applies for somebody working with, a couple $1,000 annual contract value as well. You want whoever's working in marketing, maybe it's the same person. Let's say they're different people. Whoever's doing marketing efforts in terms of, creating podcasts or webinars or creating content, etc., and also owning the website, they should be in direct contact with whoever is actually selling on a daily basis, because the person selling also needs to understand that the collateral is all updated. Like, all that needs to be aligned. And also the person selling is usually doing lead gen, which that marketing person could do as well. So I found it really helpful to have whoever is doing marketing and sales be together under the same team because it helps unify everything, that all the materials that are being sent out, any of the lead gen efforts, all that is just, it's a lot more streamlined when that team is together.
Yeah, and I guess sales is it like typically quota carrying, and then like how do you do that? Because sales usually has a quota that everybody needs to hit, and then marketing usually, not most of the time, but doesn't have like a strict revenue quota. Sometimes there are like MQL quotas. Like, how do you manage alignment there? Because I can imagine that could be a bit of an like conflict, so to say, if it's within a team, but like compensated on two different things.
Yeah. So I think in the early stages, quotas are not great idea, because your quota is as much as possible. You should be pumping out as much lead gen, as much focus as possible to close initial contracts. So commission though, yes, the way I see it is in the growth team, the salesperson is going to be the one that has the responsibility to own the deals and make sure that they move forward. And they're the ones that are actually on the calls doing the selling, right? And because of that, because they own the deals, they have that responsibility. They deserve the commission, right? If they close. The person who's on the marketing side, they are not on those calls as often. They may choose to join the calls, right, to get a sense of, how the customer reacts to the product, their pain points, etc. But really, the point is for the marketing person to be in sync with the salesperson at least once a week, so they know that they're targeting the right people, they're creating the right collateral. And I've seen issues of that in other companies where marketing does its own thing, and then sales is like, we actually needed this, and there's just wasted effort. So instead, all that should just be the growth team.
Yeah. I love that it's like more aligned, because there are even memes about like sales and marketing beefing each other. And so I think it's very smart to have them very close to each other. And then if you think about like the year ahead, where I think like the AI thing is obviously amazing for you, but generally I think the markets are still not as good as they used to. So what's something where you, maybe not that you're afraid of, but where you think, okay, like that's like something we have to figure out, or where we have to get better? Like what's on your, as every founder usually has like one or two things on their mind that they know, okay, we need to figure that out. Like take us behind the scenes a bit there.
Yeah, I think the main thing is that we're still seeing more layoffs across like every company, especially like tech companies. What that means for us specifically is, I've seen layoffs in the government affairs, lobbyist, legal departments as well. And on the outset, you might think, okay, well, that's not good, right? For us, our products, it's not good for them, period. But in perspective to with respect to our product go-to-market sort of motion, you may think, oh, there's less money, but what I think is we need to figure out, okay, how do you turn that narrative of you're cutting resources, and what we have is, the power of 2 full-time employees, but the cost of half of one or one. And I think there's a really solid sort of narrative to build there. So I think that's going to be really key to our growth this year. And then beyond that, I would say retention of your employees, right? Like, I think once you have a team that is producing really solid work and results and has a good culture, you should do what you physically can, right? To maintain that culture and retain those people. Because especially like always in startup world, the second there's any sort of financial hardship, people will leave your startup and go to more cushy, job if they're not bought into the culture and what they're doing, which makes total sense. So I think just continuing to focus on culture and keeping the team super tight is going to be the other priority for us.
I love that insight. And is there any 1 or 2 specific things that you can share that how you maintain that culture internally at your company?
Yeah, and this could be a whole nother conversation, but the high level is human connection is really important, but people don't want to see each other every day. So where we're sort of lining on is we're remote first. We're mostly based in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. And each team meets with their team in person like once every 2 months. So that ensures that people can live where their families are and where they are happiest, but they have that in-person time to actually do more strategy and planning. And I want to get that down to once every month to increase the in-person element. But the other sort of plan is, which is yet to be figured out, is for new hires, where do we do that, right? I'm based in San Francisco. Do I want to focus on growing a hub here, or do we do in New York or LA? I would say for engineers, definitely it's going to be New York because that's where my CTO is and that's where all the engineers are. For sales, potentially be here, San Francisco or LA. Something we're figuring out, but that's part of the fun of growing a company.
But it's interesting that you think about it in a way as like a satellite strategy, meaning you have the engineering hub in New York and then potentially like the sales hub in SF and so on. I think that's a very smart strategy because in the end, even though those are still, of course, like teammates in a company, the level of connection between them doesn't need to be like as frequent compared to like actual teammates in like the growth team, for example.
Exactly. And again, we're still small. So like growth team is like 3 people. It's me and 2 others, but yes, that's exactly right. That's a lot more important than my connection with like a data engineer on our team, which is still important, but there's not as much overlap. Yeah,
definitely. Now that we're coming up close on time, I mean, we're still quite early in the year. It's like beginning of February 24 right now. So what's something that you learned in 2023 that you really like put into your game as a founder to perform better in your role?
I have done a lot of reflecting on this, and I think the main lesson has been take bigger bets, which goes against what a lot of people are saying now, which is conserve cash and aim for profitability. I think there are 2 things, right, that contributed to us taking a more slow approach, which I'm very grateful for because that's part of the reason why we're still alive and operating. But it was because 1, the 3 of us co-founders were fresh out of college. We were never founders before. And 2, we never built product in this industry, right? And it's not until you spend time being a founder and build product in that industry, not have industry experience. That's different, right? A lobbyist or a corporate lawyer, they can have worked in this industry for 30 years and it would still take them the same amount of time to figure out the product needs, right? But once you have those 2 sort of under your belt and you develop an intuition of what the market actually needs and where you can actually sell a product, I think that's where you need to really just spend the money to get there, right? And that's when VCs talk about growth and when they talk about spending more money, like that intelligent spend is what they're talking about, not what a lot of these other startups did where they were burning cash on stupid things. And so I think once you have that focus, you spend the money, you hit those milestones, and you go from there. And my lesson from 2023 is we know where that focus needs to be. We need to take a bigger bet, spend the money, and get there faster.
Pat, I think that's a perfect place to end the pod. Thanks again. And just as a final thing, where can people find you and the company online?
Yeah, so Abstract, like art, abstract.us, not .com, .us. And you can find me on social media under Patrick Utz or Patricio Utz, just my first name, and then last name UTZ. And yeah, happy to chat more with anyone if they have questions. So DMs are always open.
Perfect. We will make sure to link everything up properly below. And then again, thanks to you, Pat.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicholas.
If you like this episode, then you'll love the SaaS Operator, a weekly newsletter brought to you by Early Node, with actionable insights from SaaS experts in the industry delivered right to your inbox every Tuesday for free. Visit earlynode.com to subscribe.